Princess Lyra walked along the crystal pathway of the royal gardens, her feet barely making a sound against the smooth surface. The air was filled with the soft hum of floating lights and the sweet scent of glowing flowers. Cytherea, her home, was a world unlike any other. The sky shimmered with violet clouds, and the buildings floated effortlessly above the ground. Yet, despite all the beauty around her, Lyra felt a restlessness she could not explain. Something in the air today felt different. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the distant valley. Lyra froze. It was not the sound of falling crystal or shifting energy. It was something heavy, urgent, and unnatural. Her heart raced as she moved toward the source. Through the trees and luminescent bushes, she saw smoke rising from the ground. A strange object had fallen, and the smoke curled up into the purple sky. As she drew closer, she could see it was a small ship, unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its surface was dented and pieces of metal had been scattered around. But what caught her attention most was the figure lying next to the ship. It was a human. She had seen pictures in the palace archives, but this was the first living human she had ever encountered. The human stirred, coughing and blinking at the bright light. His skin was pale compared to Cytherean's, and his clothing was torn and singed. Yet there was a spark in his eyes, an alertness, a curiosity that was undeniable. Lyra stepped closer, cautious but fascinated. "Are you alive?" she asked softly. Her voice carried a musical tone, something humans could never imitate perfectly, but it seemed to comfort him. The human nodded, a small smile forming despite his injuries. Lyra immediately realized that she could not leave him here. The palace was strict about outsiders, especially humans. They were considered fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous. But this human did not seem dangerous. In fact, there was something brave about him, a quality Cythereans admired in their own explorers and scientists. Using a gentle wave of her hand, Lyra activated a small levitation device she always carried, lifting the human carefully. His eyes widened as he floated effortlessly, his weightless position both strange and thrilling. Lyra guided him back toward the palace where she could offer medical help and protection. The palace staff were alarmed when they saw Lyra returning with a human. They whispered to each other, unsure whether to stop her. The queen had always warned that humans could not be trusted, that their unpredictability could lead to chaos. But Lyra ignored the whispers. She had made her decision. This human was special, and she wanted to understand him. Once inside the palace, Lyra placed him on a soft healing bed. The medical lights glowed gently, and a small machine began analyzing his injuries. Lyra watched as the readings came in. He had a few broken bones, some burns from the crash, and dehydration, but nothing that could not be treated. The human tried to speak, but his voice was hoarse. Lyra leaned closer and spoke slowly. "You are safe here. Rest. We will help you." His eyes seemed to brighten at her words, and he nodded weakly. As he rested, Lyra found herself studying him carefully. He looked ordinary in some ways, pale skin, simple clothing, human features. But she noticed small things too. The way he observed everything with curiosity, the careful way he moved despite his pain, and the spark of determination in his eyes. There was a cleverness in him, a resilience that fascinated her. Later that evening, as the purple sun began to sink behind the floating towers, Lyra returned to the garden. She could hear the soft rustle of leaves and the faint hum of energy from the palace lights. She thought about the human she had rescued. What was he doing so far from his world? How had he ended up on Cytherea? And most importantly, what would it mean for her world that a human was here, alive and unafraid? Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind her. "Lyra, who is this human?" It was her mother, the queen. Her tone was calm but carried a weight of caution and authority. Lyra smiled slightly, hiding the full depth of her excitement and curiosity. "He is someone who needs our help," she replied simply. Her smile was gentle but held a secret understanding. This human was more than just a stranger. He was the beginning of something extraordinary. That night, Lyra could not sleep. She kept thinking about the human and the spark she had seen in him. Something about him felt different from anyone she had ever met, and as she looked out at the violet sky, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Whatever was coming, she knew one thing for certain. Humans were not what her world expected them to be. And this one human might change everything. The next morning, the palace buzzed with quiet activity. Servants moved carefully, curious about the human who had arrived overnight. Princess Lyra walked through the corridors with him, keeping a watchful eye on his reactions. Ethan, as she had learned to call him after a simple conversation with gestures and shared words, moved with cautious curiosity. Everything seemed strange to him. The walls that shimmered with energy, the floating staircases, and the strange patterns of light in the palace halls. Lyra smiled as she watched him. Humans, she realized, saw the world differently. He stopped at a floating lantern, his hand reaching out as if to touch it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. Lyra explained patiently, describing how it floated and glowed because of the energy crystals inside. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing every detail, his eyes bright. It was not just curiosity. There was intelligence there, a desire to understand and learn. The princess decided to show him the gardens. As they walked, the floating flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their colors shifting from gold to deep purple. Strange small creatures with translucent wings flitted around, hovering near the flowers. Ethan reached out carefully, fascinated, but Lyra held his hand gently. "They will not harm you, but they are sensitive," she said. Ethan laughed softly, a sound so human it made Lyra smile. "You are different from anyone I've met," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, a small smile on his lips. He did not understand her words fully, but her tone conveyed meaning. He nodded, sensing that she saw something in him that others might not. When they reached a small stream that flowed with liquid that shimmered like liquid light, Ethan crouched to touch it. He looked amazed as the water rippled and glowed beneath his fingers. Lyra watched him carefully. Humans were fragile in appearance, but their minds worked in ways Etherians often did not expect. Even the most complex puzzles of energy flow could be understood by a human. And here was proof that curiosity alone could guide someone toward understanding. As the day passed, Lyra introduced Ethan to simple technologies of Zytheria. She showed him a device that could map energy currents in the floating gardens. To her surprise, Ethan quickly understood its purpose and suggested a small adjustment that even the engineers of the palace had overlooked. Lyra's eyes widened. His mind worked differently. He saw patterns in a way the palace's advanced systems sometimes could not. She realized that humans, though physically weaker than Zytherians, had unique strengths that could not be ignored. The palace staff whispered about him constantly, their voices tinged with suspicion.
"He is only human," they said.
He cannot survive here long, but Lyra ignored them. She had seen how quickly he adapted, how he learned without fear. She began to think about what the queen had asked the night before. She had replied with a smile, knowing that words could not fully express what she now understood. Humans were underestimated, but they had the power to surprise. Ethan, despite his exhaustion, seemed eager to explore more. He asked questions about the floating towers, the energy sources, and the strange symbols carved into the palace walls. Lyra explained as best she could, delighted by his enthusiasm. He was not afraid of being in a strange world. He was not intimidated by technology far beyond his own. Instead, he was determined to understand, to learn, and to help if he could. Later, as the sun dipped lower in the violet sky, Lyra took him to a quiet chamber filled with holographic maps of Zytheria and its neighboring planets. She watched as Ethan traced his finger across the maps, pointing out possible routes and noting areas of interest. "You think differently," she said softly. "You notice things that others miss." Ethan looked up, smiling. He did not need words to understand her meaning. The palace guards and advisors continued to watch from a distance, their expressions a mix of suspicion and amazement. Ethan had done nothing wrong, yet his presence unsettled them. Lyra noticed this and felt a small surge of defiance. He was not a threat. He was an opportunity. She had never met anyone who challenged expectations so naturally. Perhaps humans were not weak at all. They simply approached the world in ways Etherians could not always predict. As night fell, the palace lights reflected off the floating crystals, casting gentle colors across the walls. Ethan sat by the window looking out at the violet horizon. Lyra joined him, keeping silent for a moment. "You are brave," she said finally. "You do not know this world and yet you adapt." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. Lyra smiled, a quiet pride filling her heart. The day had been long, but it had shown her something important. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also clever, resilient and capable of seeing possibilities that others missed. Ethan was more than a visitor. He was a reminder that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the smallest and simplest beings could shine the brightest. Lyra felt a sense of excitement she had never felt before. This human had arrived unexpectedly, but she already knew he would change more than just her day. He might change her world. The next morning, the palace was quieter than usual. The usual hum of floating devices and soft chatter of attendants seemed muted. Princess Lyra sensed the change immediately. Her mother, the queen, had heard about the human visitor. Soon, Lyra was summoned to the royal audience chamber. The walls shimmered with light, and the air carried a sense of authority and power. The queen sat on her high throne, her expression calm but sharp like a blade hidden behind silk. "Lyra," the queen began, her voice echoing slightly in the chamber. "Who is this human you brought into our world?" There was no anger in her words, only caution and curiosity. Lyra met her mother's gaze and smiled gently, keeping her own excitement hidden. "He is a traveler," Lyra said simply.
He arrived unexpectedly and he needed our help. He is
"Different in a way that I find remarkable." The queen raised an eyebrow, the slightest hint of doubt in her expression. "Different, yes. But humans are fragile, unpredictable, and dangerous. Do you understand the risks, my daughter?" Lyra nodded, her heart steady. "I do, mother. But he has shown nothing but courage and intelligence. I believe he can offer more than anyone expects." The queen's eyes narrowed, studying her. Lyra held her gaze, refusing to waver. She had learned early that subtlety and patience often spoke louder than words. After the audience, Lyra returned to Ethan. He was awake, sitting by the window, looking out at the violet sky. When he saw her, he smiled, a little tired but still full of curiosity. Lyra took his hand gently, guiding him to a new part of the palace. Today she wanted him to see more of her world, but in a way that would test him without him even realizing it. They began with a simple task, crossing a narrow bridge suspended over a deep canyon. The bridge was strong, but it required careful steps and attention to the energy currents that kept it floating. Many Xetherians would have found the task easy, but Lyra wanted to see how Ethan would approach it. Ethan looked at the bridge, then at the canyon below. He did not hesitate. Carefully, he stepped forward, observing the currents and adjusting his movements instinctively. Lyra followed silently, impressed by his focus. He did not panic, did not rush, and did not falter. By the time they reached the other side, Lyra felt a quiet admiration for his calm determination. Next, she guided him to a chamber filled with puzzles of energy and light, a common challenge for Xetherian students. The puzzles required precision, logic, and patience. Lyra watched as Ethan studied them, turning the pieces, observing the flow of energy and then adjusting his approach. In minutes, he solved patterns that had confused even some of the palace scholars. Lyra's heart lifted. Humans, she realized, were not limited by the same way Xetherians often thought. Their minds were flexible, able to imagine solutions that others could not. Ethan's success was not just skill. It was creativity, adaptability, and the courage to try. Word of Ethan's abilities began to spread quietly through the palace. Some servants whispered about his cleverness, while others remained skeptical, reminding each other that humans were fragile and temporary. Lyra ignored them. She had seen what mattered, the way he approached the world with curiosity, respect, and ingenuity. Later, Lyra led Ethan to the palace gardens, where a series of floating platforms formed a maze above a sparkling pond. The task seemed playful at first, but it tested balance, observation, and quick thinking. Ethan moved confidently, learning from mistakes and adjusting as he went. Lyra watched him with quiet amazement. Every step, every decision revealed his resilience and intelligence. As the sun dipped low, casting violet and gold light across the gardens, Lyra knew it was time to return to the palace halls. Ethan, exhausted but happy, looked around as if seeing the world for the first time. "This place. It is amazing," he said softly. Lyra smiled. Words were limited, but his awe spoke louder than any sentence could. When they returned, the queen appeared briefly, observing from a distance. She did not speak, but Lyra could sense her calculating mind at work. The human had not caused harm, had not faltered in challenges, and had even solved tasks the palace scholars could not. Slowly, the queen's expression softened, a silent acknowledgement that humans might not be as weak as history had taught her to believe. That night, Lyra returned to her chamber, sitting by the window and looking at the stars. Ethan rested nearby, quietly sleeping after a long day of exploration and challenges. Lyra reflected on what she had seen. Humans were not strong in the ways her people often measured strength. They were fragile in body perhaps, but their minds, their hearts, and their courage could rival any alien race. Lyra realized something important. Ethan was not just a visitor. He was a reminder that strength and brilliance could take many forms. The human mind, combined with bravery and curiosity, could overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. And as she watched the stars shimmer in the violet sky, she felt a sense of excitement for the future. Humans, she thought, were capable of extraordinary things, and this one human had only just begun to show what he could do. The following days in the palace were filled with a quiet tension. Word of Ethan's cleverness and courage had spread beyond the palace staff to the nobles. Whispers followed him through corridors, some admiring his talent, others questioning his presence. "A human among us," they muttered. "How can he survive our world? How can he understand our ways?" Lyra ignored their murmurs. She had seen what Ethan was capable of, and she knew humans could accomplish remarkable things. Lyra decided to introduce Ethan to the Palace Council, a gathering of scholars, strategists, and leaders who advised the Queen. The council room was vast, filled with floating holograms of planets, energy grids, and star routes. Ethan's eyes widened, his curiosity shining through, but he remained calm. He followed Lyra carefully, observing every detail with keen attention. When the council noticed Ethan, murmurs rose immediately. Many were skeptical, some even hostile. "He is a human," one elder said. "He cannot possibly understand our ways. He is out of place." Lyra stepped forward. "He may be human, yes, but he sees and understands things differently. His perspective is valuable." The council members exchanged uncertain glances, but Lyra could see a few intrigued by her words. Lyra gave Ethan a simple task, one that required analyzing a star map to find the most efficient trade routes for the neighboring planets. The council expected failure, thinking the human would be confused by the complexity. But Ethan examined the holograms carefully, noticing patterns others had missed. After a few moments, he suggested a new route that would save energy and time, a solution no Zetherian had considered. Murmurs of surprise filled the room. The council stared, some in disbelief, some in admiration. Lyra's eyes sparkled with pride. She knew humans could be underestimated, but their strength lay in seeing the world differently. While Zetherians often relied on tradition and logic, humans relied on creativity, intuition, and curiosity. Ethan had just proven that. However, not everyone welcomed this new perspective. A rival noble, Lord Vanar, saw an opportunity in Ethan's presence. He whispered to others in the council, sowing doubt. If humans are fragile, what happens when the unexpected occurs? What if his presence brings danger? His words carried weight, and some council members nodded cautiously. Lyra noticed the tension rising and decided it was time to teach Ethan about Zetherian politics and subtlety. In the palace gardens, she explained the unspoken rules of court, alliances, rivalries, and the careful balance of power. Ethan listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. He was not easily intimidated, and he absorbed the lessons quickly. Lyra realized humans could navigate complex situations in their own way, using insight and intuition rather than rules alone. This would be invaluable in a world where power often depended on subtlety rather than force. One evening, as they walked among the floating flowers, Ethan noticed a pattern in the garden's energy layout. He suggested a small adjustment that would improve the flow of power, something that had puzzled the palace engineers for months. Lyra's breath caught. It was not only his courage that impressed her, but also his ability to think differently, to notice possibilities that others overlooked. Rumors of Ethan's abilities reached the Queen. She observed quietly, watching her daughter and the human together. While she had remained cautious, she could no longer ignore what she saw. Humans were underestimated, yes, but they were not helpless. Ethan had shown intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Perhaps there was more to humans than she had ever believed. Tensions in the palace grew when Lord Vanar publicly challenged Ethan, questioning his loyalty and intentions. The room was filled with murmurs as the noble demanded answers. Ethan remained calm. With Lyra's subtle guidance, he explained his purpose clearly and respectfully, demonstrating both honesty and confidence. Even skeptics in the council had to acknowledge his composure and quick thinking. By the end of the day, something had changed. Ethan was no longer seen as merely a fragile human. He was recognized as someone who could contribute in meaningful ways. Lyra smiled quietly to herself, knowing this was only the beginning. Humans were underestimated, yes, but they had the power to change perceptions, even in a world as advanced and careful as Zytheria. That night, Lyra looked out over the glowing city from her chamber. Ethan slept nearby, peaceful after a long day of learning, observing, and surprising the court. Lyra felt a sense of hope and excitement. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but in that unpredictability lay brilliance. Courage, creativity, and determination could overcome barriers that tradition and logic could not. Ethan had shown her that humans were capable of more than anyone could imagine, and she knew the journey ahead would reveal even greater possibilities. Lyra's thoughts drifted to the future. Perhaps humans were exactly what Zytheria needed: new ideas, fresh perspectives, and unexpected solutions. With Ethan's presence, she felt the spark of change, the beginning of something extraordinary. And for the first time, she truly believed that humans could not only survive in her world, but also leave a mark that no one could forget. The palace had grown tense over the past days. Whispers of Ethan's intelligence and courage had reached every corner of Zytheria, and not all were pleased. Lord Vaynor, the rival noble, could not accept a human gaining respect among the royal court. He began to plot, hoping to expose Ethan's weaknesses and remove him from the palace altogether. Lyra sensed the subtle shift in the air, the careful glances, and quiet murmurs that spoke of a hidden threat. One afternoon, as the violet sun cast long shadows over the floating gardens, Lyra led Ethan toward a remote section of the palace that housed experimental energy devices. She knew the place was fragile, unstable, and full of small hazards, but she also knew it would be a test, though not one she had orchestrated. The guards and some nobles had begun watching from a distance, carefully ensuring the human safety, or so they claimed. Ethan noticed the tension immediately. "Lyra, why are they looking at us like that?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Lyra paused, considering how much to reveal. "There are people who doubt you," she said softly. "They may try to challenge you to see if you can handle what they believe you cannot." Ethan nodded. Despite his exhaustion from the past days, his posture straightened. There was a determination in his eyes that made Lyra proud. As they approached the first set of devices, a small explosion suddenly erupted nearby, sending sparks into the air. A trap had been triggered, subtle enough to seem accidental yet clearly designed to test or intimidate him. Ethan reacted instantly, using his instincts and quick thinking to avoid the worst of the sparks. He carefully guided Lyra back and then assessed the situation. The devices hummed with unstable energy, and Lyra realized the challenge was greater than she had anticipated. Ethan, however, remained calm. "We can stabilize them," he said confidently, examining the energy patterns. Using his human intuition, he suggested adjusting the energy flow in a way that Zytherians had never tried before. Lyra hesitated for a moment but trusted him. Together they worked quickly, carefully following his plan. As they adjusted the energy conduits, the room's instability slowly began to stabilize. Sparks faded, the devices hummed steadily, and the danger was neutralized. The few nobles and guards watching from the shadows were stunned. The human had not only survived a trap that could have caused serious harm, but he had also solved a problem the palace engineers had failed to fix for months. Lord Vaynar's face turned pale. He had expected Ethan to falter, to make a mistake, or to panic. Instead, the human had shown courage, intelligence, and calm determination. For the first time, some nobles began to question their own assumptions. Perhaps humans were not fragile. Perhaps they could succeed in ways Zytherians could not predict. Lyra felt a surge of pride. Ethan's bravery was not only physical, it was the bravery of mind and heart. He had faced uncertainty, danger, and the weight of others' doubt, and he had risen above it. She realized that humans' greatest strength was their adaptability, their willingness to think differently, and their courage to act even when the outcome was unknown. Later that evening, the Queen summoned Lyra to her private chambers. She had observed the incident from a distance, her mind quietly calculating. "You're human," she said carefully. "He survived a test that would have challenged many of our strongest Zytherians. Tell me honestly, Lyra, what is it about him that makes him so remarkable? Lyra smiled, her heart steady. He sees possibilities that others cannot. He acts with courage even when everything seems uncertain. He reminds us that strength is not only in tradition, rules, or power. It is also in creativity, resilience, and determination. The Queen considered her daughter's words in silence. She had underestimated humans for centuries, believing them weak, unpredictable, and incapable. Yet here was a human who had not only survived but excelled, showing a combination of intelligence, courage, and empathy that no Xetherian had fully expected. Slowly, a new respect began to form in her heart. That night, Lyra returned to Ethan. He was resting in the gardens, the violet sky reflecting softly in his eyes. He looked tired but satisfied, a small smile playing on his lips. "You handled that well," Lyra said, sitting beside him. "You didn't panic and you found a solution." Ethan shrugged lightly, humility in his gesture. "I just tried to do what seemed right," he said. "It worked because you trusted me." Lyra nodded. She realized that trust, courage, and cooperation were often more powerful than fear or prejudice. As they sat in the quiet glow of the palace lights, Lyra reflected on the day. Humans were underestimated, yes, but they possessed a resilience and ingenuity that could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Ethan had shown her that strength came in many forms. Not just physical power, but mental courage, creativity, and the willingness to act despite doubt. Lyra knew the palace had changed. People would continue to whisper and watch, but Ethan's bravery had spoken louder than their fears. The human had survived, adapted, and thrived, proving that even the smallest and most unexpected beings could shine brilliantly in a world that underestimated them. And for Lyra, she felt a growing certainty that humans were capable of extraordinary things, things that could change not only her life but the entire future of Cytherea. The morning light spilled over the floating towers of the palace, casting soft golden reflections on the crystal pathways. Princess Lyra walked through the halls with a quiet confidence, her mind full of thoughts about the human who had changed so much in just a few days. Ethan's presence had sparked curiosity, admiration, and in some, fear. But Lyra saw only the truth. Humans were capable of extraordinary things. The Queen had been observing more closely than anyone realized. She had watched Ethan handle complex energy devices, navigate the palace gardens, and solve problems that had stumped Xetherians for years. Slowly, a change was taking place in her perception. Humans were not merely fragile beings. They were resourceful, clever, and brave in ways her people did not always understand. "Lyra," the Queen said softly during their morning audience, "I have watched this human. He has done more in a short time than many Xetherians could imagine. I want to understand him, and you." Lyra smiled, a quiet satisfaction filling her chest. She had hoped for this moment, the acknowledgement that humans could be seen differently. "I will show you, Mother," Lyra said. "He is not like any other being you have encountered. He learns quickly, adapts, and has courage that surprises even the strongest among us. He has a mind that thinks in ways we cannot predict, and a heart that acts when it matters most." The Queen nodded thoughtfully. "We must approach this carefully. Humans are different, but perhaps it is time to accept that difference may bring strength, not weakness." Lyra felt a thrill of hope. Finally, someone in the palace understood what she had known all along. Humans could be remarkable. That afternoon, Lyra brought Ethan to the Queen's private chambers. Ethan, though nervous, held himself with calm dignity. He bowed slightly, not out of fear but out of respect, and looked around at the elegant room filled with floating lights and shimmering curtains. The Queen observed silently, her eyes calculating, studying every gesture, every expression. "You have faced challenges that many would fail," the Queen said, her voice steady. "You have shown intelligence, courage, and insight. Tell me, human, why do you act so bravely in a world so different from your own?" Ethan considered her words carefully. I just try to understand. If I can see the problem, I can find a solution, and I want to help. I never imagined I would meet people like you, but I want to do my best." The Queen studied him for a long moment. She saw honesty, humility, and determination, all qualities she respected. Slowly, she began to smile. "You are unlike anything I expected," she said. "Perhaps it is time to see humans not as fragile outsiders, but as beings capable of great things." Ethan nodded, a quiet relief and pride in his expression. Lyra stood nearby, her smile wide but gentle, knowing that the Queen's acceptance marked a turning point for humans and Zytheria alike. Over the next few days, the Queen allowed Ethan to participate in discussions with the Palace Council. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and offered solutions that combined human creativity with Cytherian logic. Even skeptics could not ignore his contributions. Every challenge he faced, whether technical, strategic, or social, he approached with calm determination. Lyra watched with pride as humans began to earn a place not through strength alone, but through intelligence, courage, and a willingness to act when others hesitated. The Queen called a private meeting with Lyra afterward. "I see now," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Humans are not weak. They do not follow the same rules as Etherians, but they have strengths that can surpass ours. I believe this human may be the beginning of something new for our people." Lyra nodded, her heart full. She had hoped for this recognition, and now it was here. That evening, Lyra and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. The glowing flowers swayed gently in the soft breeze, and the floating platforms reflected the twilight sky. "The Queen. She seems to trust me now," Ethan said quietly. Lyra smiled. "She does. And so do I. You have shown that humans are capable of extraordinary things, and she has begun to see it too." Ethan looked thoughtful. "I never imagined I could make a difference here. I only wanted to survive." Lyra laughed softly. "Sometimes survival is just the beginning. You have done more than survive. You have inspired. You have shown that being different can be powerful." They stopped by a shimmering pond, the liquid light reflecting their faces. Lyra turned to him and said, "Humans are often underestimated, but what you have done proves that courage, curiosity, and intelligence can change perceptions, even in a world that doubts you." Ethan smiled, a quiet humility in his expression. "I just try to do what feels right," he said. Lyra nodded. She knew he was right, but she also knew that humans had the potential to do much more. With the Queen beginning to recognize Ethan's value, the future of Zytheria looked brighter than ever. Humans could bring new ideas, fresh perspectives, and unexpected solutions to a world that had relied on tradition for centuries. And for Lyra, seeing a human shine in ways no one expected filled her with hope and excitement for what was yet to come. As the stars shimmered in the violet sky above, Lyra realized that humans were no longer outsiders. They were capable, remarkable, and in their own way, extraordinary. And Ethan, the human who had arrived unexpectedly, had become a symbol of that possibility, showing that courage and intelligence could cross worlds and inspire change. The palace of Zytheria was alive with anticipation. News of Ethan's abilities and courage had spread beyond the inner halls, reaching scholars, strategists, and even neighboring planets. The Queen had decided it was time to recognize him publicly, to show that humans were not merely fragile outsiders, but beings capable of extraordinary deeds. Lyra walked beside Ethan through the grand corridors, feeling a mixture of pride and excitement. Today marked a turning point, not just for him, but for the future of Zytheria. As they entered the audience chamber, the room fell silent. Floating lights glimmered softly above, casting gentle reflections across the crystal walls. Nobles, council members, and palace staff watched closely, some with skepticism, others with curiosity. Lord Vanar stood at the back, his expression unreadable, though his eyes betrayed surprise. The Queen rose from her throne. Her voice, calm but commanding, echoed through the chamber. "Today we acknowledge a being who has shown courage, intelligence, and determination beyond expectation. This human has proven that strength comes not only from tradition, power, or familiarity, but from creativity, curiosity, and the willingness to act when it matters most." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "He has faced challenges that could have overwhelmed even our strongest Zytherians. Yet he has risen, adapted, and excelled." All eyes turned to Ethan. He stood straight, humble yet composed, aware of the significance of the moment. The Queen's words had not only honored him, but also challenged long-held beliefs about humans. Whispers moved through the chamber, a mix of astonishment and respect. For the first time, humans were seen not as fragile outsiders, but as beings capable of extraordinary contribution. Lyra smiled, stepping closer to Ethan. "He is not just a visitor, she said softly to the room, her voice carrying naturally. He is a partner, a thinker, and a friend, and he reminds us that courage and brilliance can take many forms. Her words drew nods from some of the council members and curious glances from those who had doubted him before. Ethan looked at Lyra, then at the Queen. Thank you, he said simply. I came here by accident, but I have learned so much. I only wanted to understand and help. I did not expect this. His words were humble, yet they carried the weight of his experiences. He had faced danger, skepticism, and doubt, and he had emerged not only unharmed but respected and admired. The Queen nodded. You have shown us that humans are not limited by physical fragility or unfamiliarity with our ways. Your mind, your courage, and your willingness to act have changed perceptions. You have reminded us that difference can be extraordinary. Ethan felt a surge of pride and gratitude. This was more than recognition, it was acceptance, respect, and the promise of a place in a world that had once seemed distant and unwelcoming. In the days that followed, Ethan was invited to work with the Palace Council on projects spanning energy systems, star routes, and diplomatic plans. He shared ideas that blended human intuition with Zetherian technology, often suggesting solutions no one had considered. The palace began to thrive in new ways, showing innovation and creativity that inspired even the skeptics. Lyra observed him closely, marveling at how a human could adapt so quickly, learn so deeply, and act with such courage. She realized that humans' greatest gift was their ability to see the world differently, to question assumptions, and to act decisively in moments of uncertainty. With Ethan's guidance and insight, Zetheria was entering a new era, an era where humans and Zytherians could learn from each other, combining strengths in ways neither had imagined. Lord Vaynar, though reluctant at first, could not deny Ethan's impact. He approached Lyra privately and said, I underestimated him. Humans, they are remarkable. Lyra nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Perceptions had changed, and the possibilities for the future had expanded. One evening, Lyra and Ethan stood on a high balcony overlooking the floating city. The sky shimmered with violet and gold, reflecting off the crystal towers. Ethan looked out at the horizon, thoughtful. I never imagined I could make a difference in another world, he said softly. Lyra smiled. You have done more than survive. You have inspired, challenged, and changed the way we see things. Your presence has shown us what humans are truly capable of. Ethan smiled faintly. I just try to do my best. Lyra shook her head gently. It is more than that. You have proven that even in a world that doubts you, courage, intelligence, and determination can shine brighter than anyone expects. You are a human, and that makes you extraordinary. The Queen joined them on the balcony, placing a gentle hand on Lyra's shoulder. She looked at Ethan with a mixture of pride and respect. You have opened our eyes, she said. Humans are no longer outsiders. You have shown us that the smallest and most unexpected beings can shine brilliantly, and that strength comes in many forms. You have earned a place among us. Ethan felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He had arrived unexpectedly, unsure of what the future would hold. Yet now he stood accepted, respected, and valued, not just for what he could do, but for who he was. Humanity had been underestimated, but he had proven that courage, curiosity, and determination could bridge worlds. Lyra looked at the stars, feeling hope and excitement. This human had changed more than her perception. He had changed her world. The palace, the people, and even the Queen had begun to see humans as capable, resourceful, and extraordinary. And for Lyra, it was a moment of triumph, pride, and wonder. Humans were no longer a distant mystery. They were allies, thinkers, and a shining example of what could be achieved when courage met opportunity. As the violet sky deepened into night, the palace lights reflected like stars on the crystal towers. Ethan, Lyra, and the Queen stood together, gazing at the horizon. The future was bright, filled with promise, collaboration, and discovery. Humans had arrived on Zetheria, not just to survive, but to inspire, to create, and to show that even the most unlikely beings could achieve greatness. And in that moment, humanity shone, brilliantly, courageously, and without limit.